what I'd like to do is just start with a general question about how accurate do you believe the movie was in depicting bipolar from your own lived experience or provider perspective, or even of an advocate as well. So I'll just start with Marnie, and then maybe we'll go down the row here. So Marnie, so we'll talk a few minutes here, and then we want to welcome questions. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So Marnie, what, as a med provider, someone who understands and sees people that are managing bipolar in their life every day, how accurate do you believe the movie was?
I thought it was a really interesting perspective, actually. Pretty accurate, I'd say, for somebody who tends to live kind of on the manic side of bipolar. It's from a lot of different perspectives. It's kind of interesting. He was into the substance use, which tends to be something that people that are both, depressed and manic deal with. And then the tendency to go off medication is also something that people with bipolar, really any mental illness, but especially bipolar, it's pretty typical. So I don't know. It was interesting. There were some other aspects of it that I think were kind of maybe delving into some other. If we were to categorize it according to DSM illness, I think it was kind of crossing over into some other realms, more into the schizophrenia realm. But that can be part of bipolar as well. It's kind of a spectrum, is how I like to look at it. So I thought it was pretty accurate.
So Jessie, what do you think?
I thought it was accurate. I was disappointed not to see the depressive side, because that's when you become suicidal, and that whole part really wasn't addressed. For mania, yeah, it was very realistic for mania. I don't know if I find it realistic that he stopped taking his medication when he had those two little girls to take care of. But I know when I was first diagnosed and treated, my kids kind of helped take care of me like that. And I don't think I would have stopped taking medication because I knew I had them and I had to be responsible to them. But it's a wonderful movie. I really, really liked it. But I would have liked to see the depressive side.
Yeah, it looked like they tried to get there a bit when he's staring into the refrigerator and he's sitting there in the chair, but it seemed like it didn't really get to the level in which we're kind of used to, I guess, more accustomed to seeing when you see manic depressives.
So I also liked the movie, and I mean, it was a hopeful story, which I think is important. And I guess, I mean, I have a sort of a different perspective because my mom, is a consumer as well. I was diagnosed at 19 and now I'm 36, so I've had quite a number of years in recovery. And I mean, I think it's kind of hard there's some hyperbole and there's some kind of understatement, but you can't really get away from that, I think. So, I don't know, I mean, it spoke a lot of truth, I think. Yeah.
Let me ask you, you mentioned hope.
Yeah.
And as someone who's living with a mental health issue, tell me about hope. How does that work in your life? You mentioned that.
That's a good question. I mean, I think it kind of has to be a really concrete sort of aspiration almost, I think. And I guess in real time it means different things, but I think to have that sort of resolve to get better and to improve yourself, I think that's hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jess, let me, if I could, ask you a question that kind of piggybacks on top of that, is that as a mom and someone who's living with this, and we watch this wonderful family, right? It's an awesome family. we see some individuals come into our mental health center that are just individuals, and sometimes I think people forget that they go home to their children or their husbands or their wives or parents or whatever, whomever it might be. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. What did you take away from that? And here you have your family with you tonight. So,
Well, I've been married several times. I was in the depths of a mixed state where I was manic for like half an hour and then I'd fall in depression. And one of my husbands just ran. I've never seen him again. He had some friends who were psychiatrists, and they said, "Get the hell out of there." And man, did he ever! And that was sad, but you know, my kids had to live through all that. But yeah, I can understand why the woman in the film, the mother, didn't want to stay with him.
Right.
And I'm glad we got to see the alcoholic part because that's huge. And I've been sober for quite a while now. But I did go to a fundraiser the other night, and man, even after 17 years, I could feel my hand just like, no.
sure.
It's a bitch. And when you're manic, you want to drink. And luckily, I haven't for a long time. So.
Congratulations. Yeah. So, Marty, I'm gonna ask you kind of I think it's an interesting question. I hope it will be.
Right.
You'll let me know. So one thing, we saw Cam come out, and when he was at the hospital, terribly overly medicated, needless to say,
Right.
and which is something I know you worked really hard to make sure you're finding a nice rhythm of medications and mix of medications that work for folks. But what is it like to have someone sit in front of you and you see this beautiful person and they have many gifts? And as a provider, trying to make sure that you're not subduing those as you're prescribing. I think that's something people worry about.
Yeah, very realistic worry. We do the best we can. A lot of people feel like we are experimenting. It's not exactly the way it works, but I think it's a conversation I have with my clients every day is that, I don't have a blood test at this point. I don't have an x-ray. I don't have anything I can do that's going to say, this medication is going to work perfectly and you're not going to have any side effects. That would be grand, and hopefully someday we'll get there. But until then, it's really a struggle. And I think most of us in this field work to find the right balance of medications and treatment. It's more than medication. There's holistic treatment. There's lifestyle changes. There's therapy. There's a million different things that we do. Not a single one is more important than the other. They all have to fit together. So I make a point of reinforcing that. Sometimes, just speaking on the kind of over-medication side, if I get too scientific or too weird, just let me know, because I can geek out on this stuff forever. But when somebody comes into me severely manic, sometimes we do have to sedate them pretty heavily in order to bring that mania down, and it has to do with the neurotransmitters that are kind of in this cascade. We live here in the mountains. We're familiar with an avalanche, and that's kind of how those neurochemicals in our brains go. They cascade down, and it becomes pretty out of control. So sometimes in order to stop that, like they did with Cam in the movie, we have to give people some pretty heavy-duty medications that slow them down a lot, can make them gain weight. But once they stabilize after that point, then we start working with them to bring that back up and stabilize it. And make it so that they can live normally again and move normally and be a healthy weight. Anyway, I hope that helps.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you for the answer. So just any last thoughts before I turn it over to the audience here to ask questions? Anything that comes to mind? Feel free.
Well, I know a lot of times people don't come to partake in something that's about mental illness. So I'd like to see a show of hands of people who have mental illness in their families. You don't have to out yourself. Just, yeah.
Sure.
It's amazing how many people do deal with mental illness, and it's still, there's still a huge prejudice out there, which is really too bad. And it's too bad that people who don't know anything about mental illness usually don't care to find out. And we'd like to change that.
It's a human condition, kind of cliche, but it really is. It's global. And so my kind of view on it is that it's a problem and there's a solution. And I think, well, for the past 20 years has been searching for that solution. But, I mean, everything is so precarious anyway in terms of mental state and, our world that, I mean, you have to kind of pay attention to more than I try to pay attention to things that benefit me in terms of how I'm thinking and sort of self modification, So anyway, recovery is possible, I think, and regaining also confidence, all that stuff, it can be regained, and that's an important thing, I think.
Sure. Thank you. At our mental health center, I try to remind myself and everyone, that my colleagues, that oftentimes the individuals we're working with are seen as the others. How do they fit in? And we want to create a society, and we want to definitely a mental health center, but a society in general. We want to have a movement that says you don't have to fit in, you belong. And that's what we're looking to create. And, we saw some stigma in the movie and in the film. So, but we know that we want to treat our neighbors as neighbors, and they don't have to fit into our world. We just have to be able to accept them for the gifts they have. So I guess that's my soapbox for the moment. But anyway, so why don't I take a few questions? Yes?
So, I've read that mental illness, it runs in families. So are there any studies that are, I've read that mental illness runs in families, and is there any kind of genetic component to it? I mean, what is it that's causing the mental illness, and is it something that they can actually define with a test? I mean, is there a marker on a gene? What is it?
That's a really good question. They're working on it. I can tell you they've made a lot of advances. I don't know that we know them specifically yet, but I do know that we are working on it. Because there is a definite familial link, but like a lot of other illnesses, there's not always a familial link. So that's what makes it a little challenging. And I think mental illness in particular tends to be kind of a nature and nurture kind of situation. Bipolar is a great example, actually. I was kind of cringing a couple times watching this, but somebody may have some latent bipolar disorder that kind of just sort of hangs there. They manage really well for a long time, like this guy did, until something big happens that triggers them, whether it be a move, whether it be a divorce, whether it be a death in the family, and all of a sudden they're in full-blown bipolar disorder or full-blown schizophrenia. So there is that element, and if that particular thing may not have happened to that person at that time, they may not have ever ended up with that diagnosis. So, yeah, I guess long and short of it, yes, they're working on it, and if we can find that, we will have the cure.
Well, it just happens that Kaylin and I have been involved in a study that finally ended. 4 years, lots and lots of MRIs with no tranquilizers, which was horrible, but we did it. And do you want to say what you found?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of it's an inexact. I mean, it's unproven thing, but so they found a mutation in our genetic structure that they think is very complicated, but that is responsible for overprocessing a certain enzyme in our brain, and so I guess They also tried to augment our brain levels by giving us this substance, in a drink, basically. And there were so many different kind of tendrils of this study, but they think that, there's a potential smoking gun, I guess, and that's kind of, I guess, the kind of key word for this genetic predisposition or, actual presentation, I guess, So I think it's really interesting, but I guess they're not 100% there.
Yeah. Well, I could probably add a little to this. We know that genetic testing is in this area. In cancer, they've been working on cell development, and you can replicate this in laboratories, and frankly with a lot of animals. I mean, we kind of know what they're using to test. It doesn't work well to test with the means we have to test currently, because they don't represent the same type of human response to stressors that they do in other mechanisms or other diseases. So it's really hard to do tests on animals. Also, up until now, we really haven't even known how to divide cells well enough to even look at them and map genetics. So even we could have dumped a lot of money into this previously, which should have been done, but we know that even if they could have, there wasn't the technology to be able to be really ahead of the curve on this. So we're just really catching up now. So there's some things that were holding us back, and largely we're just not real willing to put the effort into it right now. So hopefully we can get the effort going, and with technology catching up, we can start the genetic piece that seems so important. Yes.
Yeah, they were just able to make pluripotent stem cells from our cells, and they're after certain brain cells like astrocytes and neurons. And so hopefully now they'll be able to find a mechanism to actually show how the glycine, this is the compound in question, gets into that system in the brain, and they'll be able to, see it on a, basically a petri dish, It's pretty amazing.
So when they were doing the tests on you, were they also testing other family members that did not express mental illness?
Yeah, exactly. So we have 3 generations in the study they were able to get blood from, and I think they even went farther back with kind of just implied mental illness or something. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, and they also had a bunch of controls too. I think they had, I don't know what they ended up with, but a number of people who were in it just as controls.
Most of the testing currently in the mental health world is related to dementia and memory issues. That's where most of the funding is going currently. So we need studies like this to get the best and the brightest in the room, which has not been an attractive place to be for people who can make a lot more money doing other research. So maybe with breakthrough like this, we'll have some of the best and brightest get into the research. Be nice. Okay, anybody else? Other questions? Oh, I can't jump out.
The movie was set in 1978. How has treatment, medication, therapy changed since then?
Yeah, so the movie was set in 1978, and so how has treatment changed maybe since 1978?
Well, we've come a lot further in terms of the depth of medications that we have available to us, as well as the amount of research that we have available to us. I thought it was interesting he was talking about the MRIs. Both of them were talking about these MRIs. Something that we're using in research, since that question was brought up, is what they call a functional MRI. Where they actually, we can look at the neurochemicals firing or not firing in different areas of the brain, depending on what we're studying. And so now that we have been able to visualize that actually happening during, say, a manic episode or a serious depressive episode, we have been able to tailor these medications a little bit more specifically towards those neurochemicals. Unfortunately, that's also what makes it a lot more complicated when I am trying to choose a medication for somebody. There's a lot of different factors that I look into, and I guess I'll just leave it at that. But I feel like even just in the few years I've been doing this, it's come a long way, and I know it feels pretty archaic to the people that are having to live through it, but The one thing that is still a good standby is lithium. It's an amazing medication. It's been around forever. We still use it a lot. It's a medication that has a lot of stigma to it, but it shouldn't because it's an amazing medication. And funny enough, like I said, it's been there forever. It's one of our oldest psychiatric medications. So I was actually happy to see him on that.
Yeah, it's great. So, if either of you, I know you've been in sitting in rooms with psychiatrists, pricking at you, poking at you, asking you just more stuff than you ever wanted to answer. So, what's that experience been? Have you noticed a change? Have you noticed a change in medication?
No, I'm still on a few medications, lithium being one, which is, I believe, the only mood stabilizer that helps prevent suicide.
You're correct.
Yeah,
There is actual
And-
research that says it is a suicide preventer.
yeah. So therefore, I love lithium because I have been very suicidal at times. Gosh, there's so many thing, like my whole diagnosis is bipolar 1 with psychotic tendencies, so I take an antipsychotic, clozapine, clozapine and clozaril. Yeah, yeah. And Kaylin and I share that, so we have to go get our blood drawn once a month, and we go do that together. And some other medications that I take, and they're really lifesavers. I wouldn't be here. I would be gone for sure if I hadn't had the treatment that I got.
So I can speak to being on some of the more archaic meds. I've been on Haldol, which is a pretty hard hitter. Now I'm on clozapine. I'm on aripiprazole, which is Abilify in generic, and Celexa. So it's a 3-med cocktail. And I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, I pushed meds away, so I was kind of treatment resistant at times in my past. But now it's really kind of a thoughtless process. I just pop my pills, and they help me sleep a little bit, and yeah, I'm not rebelling to the point of not taking my meds anymore.
How have treatment providers changed, maybe?
Treatment providers?
Yeah.
Well, I personally saw a psychiatrist for the majority of my history with mental health, and now I'm with a nurse practitioner. I'm perfectly comfortable with how she provides my medication, and yeah, I mean, I can't speak to everyone's experience with mental health providers, but I've had a pretty good one. Yeah.
Cool. Other questions? Thank you. Say it loud and proud.
I'd like to get back a little bit more to the stigma aspect of things, and having had this experience with my own son, it's very difficult as a parent to know what to do. So I think the family has to be more involved. But to me, it seems like, people have a predisposition for heart disease, and they don't have it, or they have a predisposition. So to me, to keep looking genetically isn't the right thing. The brain is an organ, just like our heart, just like our breath, just like any other part of our body. And we see more movement in the area of studying the brain as if it really is another organ that may just have a defect.
Yeah, I think that's just from my own perspective is becoming sort of a common idea that the brain is part of our body, and I mean that's really, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's well, that's kind of all I have to say about that.
No, that is the question.
No,
Why are we ignoring our brain?
Yeah, when Kaylin first got sick, I had absolutely no idea what was happening to him. And a friend of mine sat me down, and she told me what she thought he was dealing with. And I was untreated at the time, so I would get easily hysterical, and yeah, but we finally, his dad actually finally got him to the hospital, and his treatment began. But it's not easy. It's
Montana, there's, I mean, I sent an email to NAMI 3 weeks ago, I haven't heard back. And
Huh.
when my son was in crisis, you look for, support or a psychiatrist, and it was just 3.5 to 4 months late. And then she goes, no, if there's a crisis, you need it then. You don't need it 3 or 4 months later. So,
No.
I think we have to get back to that, get rid of that stigma so that we can get together and get the treatment.
Well, we need help in Montana. We need money. Big time, I mean, the Humane Society pulled in a lot of money, and there are a lot of pictures of cute little animals, but you're not gonna get pictures of cute little people when you're talking about mental health.
I just want to say that because of the stigma, we're always the bottom of the heap as far as funding is concerned. And I think that's why it's really, really important to know who you're voting for and if they're pro putting money in our whole network for mental illness. I know that Senator Debbie Stabenow from Michigan, she got tacked on to some other bill by, I don't know how she did it, because, nobody wants to hear about mental illness in Washington, but it's called the Excellence in Mental Health Care Act. And the only way she could get it tacked on was to say that it was a pilot project, and that it's now in 8 states. And what that is, what they're trying to prove, is that with certain national, you have to get up to certain standards, actual on-the-ground community centers for mental health will be funded directly from the government. So you don't, like she says, you don't write a grant if you have a heart attack.
Right.
It's crazy. So we need to have real support from our state government and from the government in Washington, and that has to be a demand made from all of us who know what it means to have a family, that's dealing with mental illness. And how many, you say 1 in 5, a lot of people say 1 in 4 are affected in some way. So
But that's exactly my point. I think that we need to change the message. Maybe even the name. It's a physical illness. How
Right.
can we get that across to those people who are funding? It took a long time just to get insurance for mental health care. And now that's limited somewhat. So I think changing the message and getting off of the stigma, not even using the word stigma, but changing the message to say, hey, this is a physical illness. We need to treat it like we treat our hearts, our feet, our legs, everything. And if you can tell, we can kind of flip that message. I've even thought of sometimes maybe Freud did us a big disservice instead of,
Right.
he helped some, but he didn't really say what it really was.
This is kind of what I was speaking to a little bit earlier about the functional MRIs and things that they are doing. They really are working very hard on looking at the physical sides of it. The brain is really, really complex. I don't mean that to be trite, but it really is very complex. Not that anything else in our body isn't. But they are working on it. A lot of the I think the biggest limitation right now is money. Again, these functional MRIs are incredibly expensive. They're also impractical. Even if we could do a functional MRI on everybody, again, somebody who's in acute crisis is not going to be able to sit and go through this. But we are addressing that little by little. I know that myself and my program that I went through for my nurse practitioner education really focused a lot on the physical side of it. In terms of looking at the neurochemicals and the neurotransmitters and how they work, really looking at the brain as an organ. And another one of these things I say to my clients every single day is that this is a physical illness. I think there's a lot of stigma even within the population itself. Anybody with a mental illness, they all come to me and say, I thought I was strong enough, I thought I was good enough. why do I have to take a medicine for the rest of my life? I should be better than this. And, I always equate it to this is no different from diabetes or having a stroke or having a heart attack. It's not your fault. It's not anything you can change, but this is what we can do to help you. No, exact same. Yeah.
So let me
Right.
move on to another question. We know that in 2014, $53 billion was put into cancer research, and we had about $450 million put into mental health research. So we know the dollars aren't there. All right, so that's an area we need to improve on. I did a talk the other night about how do we move. We're looking at what's called integrated healthcare, which is a wonderful first step. I don't think that's a vision. Complete healthcare is a vision. Comprehensive healthcare is a vision. If I walk into a doctor's office, I should be able to have my complete body healed
Yes.
in whatever manner it needs. And there's a few folks who will take on that crisis level work, and there's many that won't. So we have to work within the field itself to begin to change from within. And then the last thing I'll say about that is when you walk into a doctor's office, it is your complete body. If questions are not asked about your mental health, or how you feel your mental health is being impacted because your leg is broken and you can't walk, or you had a heart attack and you feel depressed, you need to talk to them. You need to force the conversation. So before you walk into a doctor's office, you should say, what beautiful self do I want to create holistically, and how am I going to approach the care provider I have and letting them know what it is I need completely. And if they can't provide it for me, then you go to the next person, and you go to that. You continue to look where you need to find it, and that's how we change the system from within. It's not going to change from the outside. We know that. So, another question. And give me a chance to repeat it if you don't mind.
Okay. I really liked the movie, and I like what you said about it showed hope, and it really showed the resilience of children. It was heartbreaking in that way, whether children are dealing in a broken home or mental illness or substance abuse, and that just was so powerful for me. But Jessie, I've known you a long time, and you are a picture of hope. You're the portrait of hope. And to see and know what you have gone through, and now see you with your family around you, and your grandchildren, and your dogs, and it's just, you're a true inspiration. And I'm so glad to be learning about it. I'm undiagnosed. But there is such a stigma about it, and there's now, everybody has bipolar, it's like, a strong woman who speaks up and, oh, she's bipolar. Or, so it's almost like people are almost using it as an excuse to dismiss people, too. And, so I think that's kind of an interesting conversation, because that's what I'm seeing a lot now. Oh, they got the bipolar. Oh, they're bipolar.
Yeah, is the fad,
Yeah, it's a little, fat is one word, I guess, you can use. I think that our thinking has kind of changed in terms of diagnostically. I know a lot of us believe that most mental illness is a spectrum. So there's, again, long and short of it, I think a lot of us see it as a spectrum. Is bipolar overdiagnosed? Possibly. But yeah, you guys are amazing.
Do you want to respond to that, Jessie? That statement?
thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know what, yeah, it's been a long haul. Been a really long haul. And, I would like to see more happen in Washington. And, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Kaylin's stepmother, Kathleen Williams, is running for Congress, and she has known us for a very long time, and she's been amazing with Kaylin and his illness, and knows all about it. So, Kathleen, you're amazing. and I'm going to hold your feet to the fire if you get to Congress and don't do something about mental illness.
Nice. So one maybe last question before we end things.
It's not maybe much of a question, but you talk about the spectrum. And I find people say, like the woman up there talked about, people just use bipolar pretty randomly, as if that describes somebody or something.
Right.
To me, bipolar is like a fingerprint. Everybody experiences it differently. And for me to see the movie, my experience in my life of people with bipolar, well, it didn't look anything like what I saw in that movie. So it just, again, it brings home to the fact that everybody that has it really has it uniquely.
Absolutely. I think there's some characteristics that are diagnostic, if you will, but everyone's lived experience is very different, as well as within that spectrum. Like I kind of commented on this movie to begin with. I think this is the experience of somebody who tends to live more on the manic side, which definitely can happen. Some people can be more with like a solidly bipolar one, where they're living way up here. They drop down to what most of us might consider like an average or a normal, and they're going to feel really, really depressed because they're so functionally up here. But then there's your bipolar 2. Bipolar 2 people tend to live a little bit more on the low side with occasional jumps up, kind of seen more as irritability, things like that. This is why it kind of looks like we overdiagnose it a little bit, because people do look really, really different when they have bipolar disorder. It's also what makes it really diagnostically difficult. But yeah, we try to focus on everyone's personal lived experience. We are all individuals, and nobody ever fits perfectly into a box.
So one last question, and then maybe I could get Jessie to talk about Bring Change to Mind and the work you're doing with advocacy. So that'll be the wrap up, if you don't mind. And then we're going to try to show a public service announcement from your organization. So we'll move your chairs and we'll get you back in the audience. So one last question, and then we'll be wrapping up.
I just wanted to see if anyone could touch on the role of families in a little bit more of a detail. I noticed in the movie the families weren't really getting any support, and the kids seemed to be kind of all over the place, changing roles, almost taking a parental role. And then Cam's wife seemed to be very overly patient to me.
It's really personal for me. I was raised by my mom. She was a single mom with pretty severe bipolar disorder. So I was pretty touched by watching those kids because it felt very familiar to me. It was actually pretty hard for me to watch, if I'm honest. I guess I'm not. Family is really important. I think that something that this movie. One thing that's really different about this movie compared to now is that this was 1978, and as we saw a lot, there was a lot of pressure on the mom to be in the home. I think society is a lot different now. I think as a whole, with therapy, with med providers, psychiatrists, all the way around, we're looking at people much more holistically and try to include family when people want the family included. That's another really unfortunate part of mental illness, is that a lot of times either family has pushed away the ill family member, or vice versa. The ill family member pushes away those who care the most about them. I personally try to include family. I think it's really, really important. Whoever you consider family as well. That's another story, but.
Well, without my family stepping up and whisking me off to a hospital, I'd be dead. There's no doubt in my mind. I let Glenn know that I was extremely suicidal, and I was on an airplane like a week later, where I got really good treatment. And it's unfortunate that I couldn't go to somewhere here in Montana. It just didn't exist then. I know Warm Springs is probably a lot better now than it was when I was so sick. But yeah, family. My dad, the funny thing is, my dad is an MD, and he did not understand mental illness at all. It made him very nervous. But everyone has been very patient with me and loving and wonderful, and with Kaylin also. It's, you can't do it without family. I mean, you can if you have to, but having family there to support you when you fall is priceless.
I just want to say I agree with both of you. And I just want to say that I was in the hospital for 2 years at a halfway house, and there were people there who, it would shock some of you, but that were there for 28 years. Their family had kind of just, put them in this halfway house and basically forgot about them. And yeah, it's tragic. Sure.
Just a couple final thoughts, and we'll just come down the line, and we'll.
Yeah, again, it's just that recovery, in real time, it means different things. And, but it's something that I've resolved to work towards, whether that means, morally that I'm doing well, that, I've got a good gauge on myself in every respect. Yeah, I can't speak enough about, well, I guess I can, but recovery is possible, and happiness is possible, and I think it really comes down to is confidence, and I guess to have the confidence to seek out help when you need it, and to see the world as it presents itself, as it really is. Because I know, your mind can get away from you in terms of reality or perceiving reality, and to pretty large extent. And so I think being careful with yourself is, I can't speak enough about that too, So again, acknowledge how precarious things are, but show yourself some love. Yeah, I liked what you said earlier, and it is about love. It's about loving yourself and other people, obviously. So thank you. I appreciate you all being here.
I don't think I really have any wise words. I can just sit and jabber forever. But we have to talk about it. We have to keep talking about it. I think that's really the main thing. Yeah, let's keep talking about it, and let's keep making it a priority.
Jesse, a few final thoughts from you, and maybe share a little about Bring Change to Mind. And Glenn, if you have anything you'd like to add, please, I'm right here for you. So.
Well, when Kaylin was so terribly sick, I noticed the prejudice that when I spoke about him, and I called my big sister and said, is there something you can do to help with the stigma, which I also like to call prejudice because it's a little, and man, did she ever. She organized Bring Change to Mind. Our first PSA was shot in Grand Central Station, and it's been a real mover. A lot of other organizations have popped up, which is wonderful. And you can go online, you can get help online. We have high school programs that any high school who wants to get more aware of what's going on in the world of mental health with their students, there's a wonderful program that you just plug into and you got it. And college campuses also were quite evident on a lot of college campuses, and that's it. Want to say any more about? Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to show the PSA, but we did the second PSA was me. Well, you'll see it, but I just want to preface. I did it doesn't matter, and I just hope that it starts a conversation, that it kind of busts some stigma. So, but I'm really proud of my Aunt Glenn for starting it, and I think it has some real potential for truth, for showing people what it's about, and truth and honesty. So, anyway.
Thank you. Well, Kaylin and Jessie and Marnie, thank you so much for your wisdom.
Thank you.
So if you come over to Gallatin Mental Health Center, we don't have a 3-month wait to see a provider, and you get wonderful Marnie. So do not hesitate. Keep in mind, I just wanted one little piece of mythology I think that is often associated to our mental health center is that we are a community health center, but we're not funded by government agencies and/or county dollars. So we're a private nonprofit, and I think sometimes that gets confusing because people think we exist on tax dollars, and we don't. We exist for fee-for-service from Medicaid dollars largely, and then insurance billing. So just a couple of things you may want to know there. So please, we want to be an inclusive mental health center, and we're working hard to provide yoga, mind and head and brain massages to individuals, and bring alternative type medicines to people who have never had an opportunity to experience those before. Because of stigma. And so we're trying to move us forward and take advantage of this 21st century that we live in. So thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to be quiet so you can enjoy this PSA, but thanks for being here. It means a lot to everyone. And remember, you cannot unlearn what you heard tonight. So when confronted, you now know you have an answer, and you've heard from the best and the brightest. So please take it with you, and when challenged, confront. Right? Teach when then things need to be taught, and ask questions when questions need to be asked. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.